Hey, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Good to have you here as always. So this week, I am talking about skinhead gigs, bonehead gigs. Well, one in particular, the Ian Stewart Donaldson Memorial Concert that's held every year. Well, used to be held every year in many places around the world. In particular, Australia, 2007. The Australian ISD Memorial Concert, which was actually the first gig that I ever attended. And a couple of weeks back, I interviewed Tommy, the drummer from Final War, who actually played at that gig. So it kind of got me thinking, I need to talk about these gigs. Yeah, I need to share what they're like, what it's all about. Is it as violent and dangerous as what the media portray it as? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So when I first started hanging out with the movement and these guys in Brisbane and the Gold Coast, I didn't know much about the whole movement. These guys were talking constantly about ISD. We're going down to ISD this year. And I'm like, kind of curious, but didn't really ask. Then one day they were all talking about their plans for going down to ISD, and they looked at me and said, "Are you coming?" And I said, "Well, excuse my ignorance, but what is ISD?" They kind of looked at me and they were, "Well, it's an Ian Stewart Donaldson Memorial Concert." I'm like, okay. I knew who he was at least. It turns out that every year, Blood and Honor chapters all around the world host a memorial concert to Ian. The gig was a lot more than that. It was more than just a gig of a whole bunch of skinheads getting together and listening to some really bad music. So when I got invited down, I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity for me to meet people and to let people know who I am. You know, because I had actually had a little bit of an interest in becoming a Hammerskin or becoming a part of the movement, as I've said in my other videos. And this was going to be my opportunity to meet all the other Hammerskins, because as I said, these weren't just a little gig, they were a get together for pretty much everyone in Australia. Now the Hammerskins actually had their national meetings the same weekend. They coincided it because everyone was coming together for these gigs. And that's the thing, everyone in Australia, everyone who's in that movement, everyone who was a part of it would make sure they could get to these gigs. If not for the music, just to support the scene and to come together, because they can't really do it in public most of the time anyway. So I was excited. This was my opportunity to go and meet everyone and see what the scene's all about and really immerse myself in this movement. So once we got down there, it was literally just everyone hanging out in the center of town, all waiting for this gig to happen, all catching up with friends and stuff like that, going to bars, doing a little bit of shopping. The usual stuff that you would see for people going to any other concert, you know, for a Britney Spears concert. Well, not quite. But then on the Friday night, I got invited to a dinner, and I got told that this was a regular occurrence. Generally, with all the gigs on the Friday night before, they have a dinner, and it's for everyone in the movement to come together and just sit down and have a nice dinner and chat and all that kind of stuff. And of course, it was at a German restaurant. You know, I got to meet most of the guys in the scene. A few of them were a bit standoffish towards me, but a few of them really made an effort to get to know me, and I was really, really surprised. I actually felt quite welcomed by quite a few of them. I thought, okay, this is an awesome start. You know, I'm kind of feeling welcomed. Great, this is what I need. You know, the dinner was fantastic. Almost had no incidents. You know, unfortunately, when a lot of these guys get together and the alcohol starts flowing and they start talking about their past and this and that, you know, tempers tend to get a bit flared, and someone copped a headbutt because he wouldn't shut the fuck up about the past. And so when it came to the gig, well, everyone was super excited for that. But the day of the gig was painful because no one gets told the location of the gig until an hour before the gig actually kicks off. This is done for obvious security reasons, because there are a lot of Antifa reporters, police and all that trying to find out the location of these events. And when I was actually there, I went out a little bit early to help set up, and I was actually doing the photography for the show. Antifa did actually contact the owners of the hall that it was being held at. They were there helping us set up, and they intercepted this phone call. And they were talking to Antifa, telling them, no, there's nothing on, you're full of shit, blah, 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 usual stuff. Oh, so they're, you know, listening to all of this going, oh, this is a bit surreal, you know, haven't really encountered anything like this before. This doesn't happen at, you you know, the biker parties or anything. But hey, after a long, long day of waiting, people start getting the address and they start filtering in. And it's a bit of a hard one because most people are staying in the Melbourne CBD, and the venue is actually in Sunshine North, which is a fair hike outside of Melbourne, and a lot of taxi drivers would not drive people to there. They definitely wouldn't pick people up. Many people found out the hard way that that was the case. They were sitting there till 4 a.m. waiting for taxis to come pick them up. But anyway, on to the gig. The first thing I noticed was the amount of merchandise and merch stalls and all that kind of stuff set up around the place. It was everywhere. Everyone was selling all sorts of CDs, t-shirts, flags, magazines, you know, the Blood and Honor magazine, Blood and Honor Australia magazine, all this kind of stuff. And I was actually pretty blown away, and people were going nuts over it. But then I realized, you know, this stuff isn't sold in stores. You can't just run down to EMI or pick yourself up the latest Final War or Fortress CD, you know. Downloads weren't a huge thing. So this is where you got your music. This is where you got your merch, especially because the merch, it was very, very hard to find. But then onto the bands. Yeah, the bands. And we had 4 bands playing that night. And the first up was Quick and the Dead, which is a revival band. They only played this one gig as far as I know. You know, it wasn't a great revival. None of them had really practiced, but hey, you know, it was a good start. Next up was Baylor. One's got a story, one's got a move. Say it was for me, you life is a shit. What's to be time? And to be honest, I cannot remember anything about them. I can't remember anything about their performance or the band themselves. Sorry, I just blocked that out. Might be a reason for that, who knows. But then, of course, Final War. The international guests that came over, Final War played their set, and it was excellent. It was a great set. They're actually an amazing band, and it was the first time I'd ever heard them. I didn't even know they were playing. No one actually knew they were playing, because it's never announced until, you know, the day of the show. Of course, you know, for security reasons, got to make sure that the guys actually get into the country first. They played a howling set. I was impressed. I went over it and bought their CDs straight away. I actually bought one of their t-shirts too. I really liked the sound. I thought it was like Flogging Molly, that kind of energy, you know, the kind of OC punk. Really great stuff. But then the band that everyone was waiting for was Fortress. Fortress were legendary in the scene. You know, they were a really well put together band. Musically, they were quite talented. Fortress were playing their final gig. You know, I had actually met Scott, the lead singer from Fortress, that weekend. We'd actually spent a lot of time talking and became friends. And he had told me that he was just over the scene. He was just done with it. He had been over it for many, many years. But they wanted to do one last performance, and they put on a wicked show. Of course, it was their final gig. And Scott lost his voice about 2/3 of the way into the set, but he soldiered on through. And the last song I heard him performing was actually Motorhead's Ace of Spades. He was giving it his best and belting that out in a very croaky voice. A couple of the things that I saw at the gig, well, I saw a lot of people having fun, of course, you know, but it was very tentative for a lot of people. A lot of people didn't want to be seen to be having too much fun or showing their excitement. Most of them are very stoic in their stances. They were just standing there like. But then I noticed one guy walking around, and he was on a different wavelength altogether. And this guy had actually gone and bought himself one of the gig t-shirts. Like, way to go, support the gig, support the movement. But he'd bought a girl's t-shirt, one of the really tight fit cut t-shirts, and he'd been told it was a girl's t-shirt. And he's like, no, that's okay, I want this one. And he put it on immediately. Now, this guy started walking around like he was the man. And that's why I was paying attention to him. I was like, this is the wrong place to be trying to prove yourself when you're wearing a girl's t-shirt. He'd happened to turn around and he saw one of the Hammerskins, who he proceeded to shoulder check as he walked past him. To which a Hammerskin turned around and was like, "Motherfucker, do you know who I am?" Points to his Hammerskin patch, and the guy just went, bam. He got knocked out. He got sent flying over a table. Yeah, the guy pretty much got up and, he was out on his feet, but he staggered off, and that's the last we saw of him. So, yeah, if you want to fuck around in a girl's t-shirt, you're going to find out. Yeah, and he did. At that stage, I wasn't that surprised. That, okay, there's the first incident of the night. First band hasn't even started playing, and someone's already been knocked out. Much later on, the second incident of the night happened. There was another guy getting punched out in the toilets. Now, he was in the girls' toilets with a young lady from New Zealand. Now, she had come over with the New Zealand Hammerskins, and she was actually the ex of one of the Hammerskins. She had ducked into the girls' bathroom with some guy. He took offense to it and went in and, gave him a bit of a tap up the side of the head, and wasn't anything major, but I thought, okay, this is what happens at these events. There's generally that kind of anger and aggression. And there was, in all the events that I actually went to over the years, there was always some form of aggression. There was always, some violence breaking out. When you've got a lot of angry guys with a lot of hatred towards the world and you add alcohol, that anger is going to find its way out, and you find they'll lash out towards each other. So overall, the gig itself, it wasn't what you would call an amazing gig. It wasn't a standout. These gigs definitely served the purpose of bringing everyone together in the movement and bringing everyone together through music, which was what Ian's intention was with Blood and Honor. And that's why these memorial concerts went on for a long time. Now, as far as I know, they don't hold the memorial concerts anymore. I haven't kept tabs on a long time. I know the last one that was organised in Australia was 2019, and that came under huge public scrutiny. There was a massive petition with thousands of signatures just to get it shut down. The gig did go ahead for that year. They didn't buckle to public pressure, but as for the following years, I'm pretty sure it didn't. COVID happened the following year, of course, so it was impossible to organise these gigs. But the scene and the movement has actually changed a lot, especially in the last 6 years. Now, I don't know whether these gigs are being held anymore. They were never really advertised in the public. They have very few areas where they can advertise them. They can pretty much only do it through messaging these days. So it would be hard to pull one of these off, and it would be hard to get a lot of people attending. So they probably don't. I don't know. So there you go. That's a bit of an insight into my first ever gig, the Australian Blood and Honor Ian Stewart Donaldson Memorial gig in 2007. I do have some fond memories. I had a lot of laughs, and I did meet some good people. I won't deny that. It was a good time. But overall, as far as, a fun time gig, they definitely aren't. They're definitely not one of the most memorable concerts I've ever been to, that's for sure. Yeah, the music quality definitely wasn't up there with some of the bands that I've actually seen, but it's a memory. Alrighty, so that's it for another day. Thanks so much for tuning in. Much appreciate you being here as always. And hey, if you want to keep supporting me and supporting the channel, many different ways you can do it. You can buy me a coffee, or you can buy merch, Patreon, super likes, all that good stuff. All the links are in the description below. And hey, if you're still around in about 10 minutes time and you want to come and hang out on a live stream, head over to the channel. Sunday Session with Brad starting in about 10 minutes. But if not, I will see you next week on Thursday for another awesome video. Have a great week, y'all. Peace out. Love and light to you.